Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of building a barn board pantry. Now before we get started, I just wanted to make a correction from the last video. I mentioned that I wasn't going to use glue on this project, but after having a week to think about the process I'm going to take from start to finish, there are some aspects that I'm going to be using glue. You won't see that in today's video, but eventually when I get to the finishing parts, I'm thinking about using glue. So don't be surprised if that happens. So last week we left off with a good start. We got the shelves on. We got 3 of the bottom shelves, a top shelf, and the main shelf, which I ripped into 4 pieces to eliminate the cups, and got myself essentially a good working structure to work from. But today we're going to start with structuring the bottom. So if you remember from our last video, if I show you the drawing here, my width for the bottom of the pantry was 37.5 inches. So I'm going to cut these pieces to 37.5 inches. I'm going to figure out what my height needs to be. So I got 1.25 inches. So I'm going to rip it down to that, and these 2 pieces will hold my structure in place. All right, what I'm doing next is I'm going to do the shelf that I didn't get to do last week, only because I didn't have smaller pieces laying around and I didn't want to rip into a full one if I didn't have to. This piece seems to be short enough, so I'm going to cut this down to 23.25 and install that last shelf. All right, so these shelves that I installed last week, they're about 11 7/8 width. And the problem is I have really big feet. So I need about a minimum of 13 inches. So I'm going to add some little pieces on the back of these shelves. And so how I'll get my measurement there is I'll hook on underneath the shelf, make my mark at 13 inches. And I'll do the same on this side, make a mark at 13 inches. I just want to make sure that I have the same width on each side. And yeah, they'll cap each of these shelves, bringing it out to 13 inches. So on this side, I have 1.5 inches. And this side is giving me 1.5 inches. So I'm going to favor the 1.5 inch side. So that's going to be my number. But first, I want to grab this measurement from the ground to the shelf, which should be 4 foot and 1/8. If you remember from the last video, that's the height that I made that shelf. So I'm cutting it down to 4 foot and 1/8 of an inch. All right, so I'll just measure what I have in between, which is 17.5, and I'll divide that by 2. That gives me 8 3/4 of an inch. And I'll install this piece right away, just so that when I add my pieces to my shelves, there's something to screw from the sides from. So my little additional pieces are 23 1/4, if you remember from the last video. And I'll take my number that I chose, which was 1.5 inches, to give me my 13 inches added to the shelves. And I'll rip each piece down to that. Alright, for the sake of just keeping things neat and uniform, I'm going to put these things together, get them all straight, and I'm going to score some lines. And these lines are where I'm going to be drilling my holes. I just want them all to be the same. I'll find the dead center between those two lines and make a line there as well. Now if you notice, that very bottom one, it happens to fall right on a knot, so I'll put one right to the side to avoid that knot. I want my drill bits to be the exact width of my screws, just so that my screws don't have any resistance. And then I'll switch my drill bit out with a wider bit, the size of the screw head, so that the head can sink deeper. And then the fun part. So if you notice, my siding piece is a little bit out of flush because there's no screws yet drilled into the side. So I'm going to do that from the side, and it's going to pinch it closed for me. Now I'm going to take this piece off because it broke in the middle, as you can see, and also there's going to be a backing piece against these shelves, but also there's going to be a bottom shelf. So I'm going to do the floor of this bottom shelf first so that this backing piece rests on top of it. So I need to make a mark at 12 7/8 of an inch. Okay, so I got 17 inches, which means I'll have to rip 2 pieces down to 8.5 inches. And I'll start by putting my first piece temporarily at the end, just wedge it inside to keep the shape of my 23 1/4 width. That way I can get my first piece in. And then my second piece. And now it's time to get the measurement for my backing. So I'll put my tape down onto the floor of the bottom shelf and all the way to the top. And then start installing my pieces. And there we have it. Alright guys, that's a wrap for today. I think we made some good progress on the pantry, and it's coming together really well, and I'm just really thrilled with how things are looking, and man, I'm excited to show you guys some more. So thanks for joining me. Please hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. Be sure to subscribe. Let me know what you thought of the video below in the comments, and I'll see you guys next week.